All right. Well, good morning. Welcome to this week's. Unfortunately, I noticed I've got the wrong date on there, but it's 9/14. Once again, we're doing part two of our Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. We have two wonderful guests joining us this week. Pastor Cook making his return after, well, about a year almost, but we're thrilled and excited to have you here. OG join us once again. And Renee is back. Feeling
Good
better?
morning.
Good morning.
Good
Feeling
morning, everybody.
just got a little bit of a lag, but how was everybody's week to start off? Renee, let's touch on you. How was your week? How are you doing? Okay, I don't know if she's got us or not. OG, how was your week? How are you doing?
It was good, loved one. Been in the studio with my artists, and that's it, man. That's it.
Wonderful. Pastor Cook, yourself?
It's been a great week. I cannot complain one lick. Thank you for asking.
Absolutely. We got Sam on the line. He's going to be in and out with us, but he's joining us. And of course, Renee.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. We're going to have a great discussion today.
All right. Well, real quick before we get into this discussion, Pastor Cook, let's start with you. Got to give a little bit of background, tell about yourself so we can get those who haven't met you yet familiar with you.
Sure. Thank you very much. I am absolutely honored to be here with you all this morning. I serve as the senior pastor of the St. Smyrna Baptist Church in the city of Noonan, Georgia. And certainly I am just absolutely honored to participate in this conversation. I'm sitting now in the funeral home that I own. And certainly we have serviced many individuals who have committed suicide, or we've serviced families who've had to deal with the aftershock of such a moment. And so I'm just honored that you all would think enough of this little Morehouse man that I could join the conversation.
All right. OT, those who this is their first time, give a little bit of background on yourself. Let them know who you are so that we can get you started.
Definitely, recording artist, OG Suicide, also founder and CEO of One West Magazine, and also a suicide survivor, and now an activist for suicide prevention awareness, bullying prevention, cyberbullying prevention, and every day above ground is a blessing.
Absolutely. One of the things that I thought that we would definitely like to discuss today was some research that I did this past week. It's actually showing where they're trying to say that the cannabis and those people who use it on a regular basis are linked to a higher rate of depression and suicidal ideology. Like, for example, this study saying that over 280,000 people between the ages of 18 and 35 that participated in the National Survey on Drug Use and Health from 2008 to 2019. They answered questions related to their use of the cannabis, the depression, suicidal thoughts, plans, and attempted. They researched 4 separate groups that use them: people who use daily, people who use non-daily, and individuals who use it to help with the disorder or pain management. According to it, the risk remains even aren't in those who experience the depression. They say it leaks into the people who are using it for medical reasons, medicinally. 9% of the people use the cannabis on the daily. That's it. Only 9% supposedly. 7% of the people who used it non-daily experience suicidal thoughts, and only 3% of the people who didn't use it, cannabis, on daily had those thoughts. So they're trying to say that 35% of the people who did not use cannabis at all, they had suicidal thoughts. So 75% of those that did use cannabis on the regular had the suicidal ideologies and the thoughts. OG, definitely want to speak with you on that, because I know that you've not only attempted it, but also used it on the regular. So
yes,
me personally, I think these stats are kind of going in the percent of saying, hey, we don't want it legalized because we think that it's harmful to people, and here's our study to prove that.
Definitely not harmful. Me being a suicide survivor, after my attempt and I survived, it was mandatory that I had to see a psychiatrist. And it also was mandatory I had to take a prescription of Cinequans that was prescribed by the psychiatrist that made me more depressed and more suicidal than I was before I started taking the medication. Um, Started using this cannabis, stopped taking the Cinequan tablets. Life got better for me. Definitely, marijuana is not me personally. I can't speak for everyone out there. How everybody have a different reaction, to cannabis. With me personally, I don't believe that, because cannabis more it relaxes you, it don't depress you. I I think they're not including that maybe a lot of these people are using cannabis plus the medication that they're being prescribed. So instead of saying, oh well look, it's not the medication because this help you, it's the cannabis that you're doing that's causing that. So I definitely don't agree with that at all.
No, and I agree with you. And think about it too. Alcohol is a depressant.
Whoa.
So if we want to go down this slope, how many people that use alcohol on a regular have these same thoughts or ideologies because it is a depressant? And myself going through the times I've been, I know that if I was drinking, my thoughts were more in that realm than without.
Yes, yes.
Pastor Cook, if you could still hear us, get your time in on that one, especially from the religious end as well as what you've seen yourself and, like you said, working in the funeral home.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I just want to suggest and remind us that, when you isolate, a segment of any population and discuss what it is that that segment of the population participates in, just from a contextual standpoint, it's very good to mention there are individuals who go to church every Sunday who think about suicide. There are individuals who have therapists and psychologists who still consider suicide as a viable option. And so, to particularly, I think, link suicide to cannabis, maybe just a bit of a stretch, as it is to say that, people who go to church are going to commit suicide, and people who, like red cars are going to commit suicide, this, that, or the third. But from a standpoint of, I guess, embracing, if you will, or from the standpoint of believing that, those who smoke are more likely to commit suicide or have suicidal thoughts, I can't scientifically speak to that, but just as a human being, it would just appear to me that all of us at some point, no matter what segment we identify with, are going to share some similarities, whether those similarities are positive, whether those similarities are negative, whether they're optimistic. I guess to make it simple, I can't say that I would accept any kind of thinking that would suggest to participate in cannabis makes any individual more suicidal than I can any other activity.
Right. And actually, the study later goes on. It says health experts think that the link between the two are not so simple because they do admit that there are other factors, genetic, environmental factors that could increase the risk of the mental illness and the suicidal ideology. So they do go on to say that, hey, this is not just because they're using. There are multiple factors like what you spoke of last week, OG. So they are saying that. But again, if you're starting off with the link is higher, well, that's going to grab your attention. And we've seen that on multiple realms. One of those, for example, something we've seen for many years, talking about police officer brutality. Yes, there are people in multiple factors that use their job improperly. A banker, a lawyer, a doctor, whoever. That doesn't mean they're all bad. We have plenty of officers who are helpful for us. We have plenty of people that are using cannabis that is helping them. So there's we need to be on that level playing field to show the stats accurately and truly.
Yeah.
What I love is Family Feud. I always use that as an example. You always say of the people we surveyed, what were the top 5 answers to this? Well, did they survey 100 people, 1,000 people, 1 million? We don't know. We do not know.
Could have been, could have been 4 people.
Absolutely. There's so many different things there. And going further in the data, in 2019, a data from NIDA 45 million Americans use cannabis, and 9.8 million were daily or nearly daily users. In the same year, 4.7% of adults over the age of 18 reported feeling depression. There were more than 47,000 suicide deaths in 2019, according to the CDC. Now, I know that was 3 years ago, and that was pre-pandemic and COVID, but those numbers right there definitely show, we've got, as we know, a depression issue in America, mental health. And one thing I want to touch with Pastor Cook is, how do you feel that is there a stigma in the religious realm of, we can't talk about it in church, we can't let other people show, or even those who are religious, whatever religion there is, do they feel they're not allowed to talk to people because they want to bring people to religion, but by saying, I have mental health, I have suicide thoughts, it's a bad witness?
Yeah, one of the horrible aspects about all religions, not just Christianity, is that those religions are facilitated by people. And no matter how well-intentioned we are, people just make mistakes. We are prone to error. We are prone to not follow through what we desire to, from healthy eating, healthy living, even to religious practice. And so, matter of fact, maybe about 30 days ago, 60 days ago, sat through a funeral service of someone who had committed suicide. And during the remarks portion, it was open. Anyone could get up and say what they wanted. And someone got up with the intentions of encouraging the family, but said some horrible things that just implied just all kinds of unnecessary things. So much so, the preacher had to get up behind that person and kind of clean up the moment, so that they didn't get beat up in the parking lot for some of the awful things that they said. And had the best intentions. And so I said that to say, in the church, there are stigmas pertaining to everything. And one of the things I always encourage our members who try to evangelize to the best of their abilities, be mindful of what you are saying to people. The church has so many stigmas, and it's not just cannabis, homosexuality, restoring individuals who have checkered past. The church has so many things that they don't want to talk about, but I remind our members, be careful about what you're saying about people who use cannabis. You may be speaking to a church mother whose son uses cannabis every day, and you're offending her and she doesn't know it. You may be inviting a person to your church who, uses cannabis on a regular basis, and you are doing the opposite of your intentions by shutting down. And so the church has to get beyond those uncomfortable moments. The entire ministry of Jesus was uncomfortable. Before Jesus hit the scene, it was about the law. It was about doing what the law said. If you did not do what the law said, you were disqualified from fellowship, you were disqualified from status, you were disqualified from participation. And so, the church needs to be prepared for discomfort. Discomfort is what the church should be about.
Right. And to your point, how many times did we see that Jesus was with the prostitute in the city? He was with the lepers. He was with Zacchaeus, the tax collector. I mean, he didn't stay in his comfort zone. He stepped out and witnessed and was a friend, first of all, a friend to the people that needed it. Didn't condone them, helped them, and tried to make things better. At OG, for example, you talked last week about how in you growing up, you weren't supposed to be talking about mental health, suicide thoughts, all of that. Let's touch on that for a moment. Let them get the idea there.
Yes, definitely. I mean, growing up, it's definitely something. And what I've learning a lot too now is a lot of our young people, are having suicidal thoughts. And we really have a big issue that gets kicked under the rug so fast as soon as the conversation comes up. Some people would rather talk about, fancy jewelry, fancy cars, and the good things of life, but block out the issue that we really have. We have kids. When you have kids 6, 7, 8, 9 years old considering suicide and actually attempting suicide and passing from it, which that hurts. That hurts to see that. A kid at 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, that's the least thing should be on their mind. You know, their biggest thoughts on their mind should be playing with their friends, their video games, and really, really loving life, not feeling like I don't want to live anymore because they're being bullied, they're being cyber bullied, and they feel like, who do I talk to? Because they're being threatened by the bullies. If you tell anybody, I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z to you. If you tell anybody, so they live in fear, and then there's also things that go on in households, amongst our young people, that they live in fear of telling or mentioning that's going on in their household. And it's like, who do I talk to? So they have no one to talk to, so they take their lives. Like, it's sad, and I can't express it enough. Like, this thing gotta be front and center. The only way to deal with the issue is to put it front and center and execute on creating a way to fix this. It's fixable. Look at me. At 22 years old, I put a gun to my head and shot myself in the head. I didn't want to live. Look at me now, 53 years old, 4 kids. Where they grow. My youngest is 13, 5 grandkids, loving life, being an activist for this, being the face of never give up, because I know that feeling of saying, I want to kill myself. And me, I tried to execute with it, but God was like, no, I still need you. I got some other things I need you to do. I need you to show that life gets better. Just never give up.
Well, and other people needed you to be able
Yeah.
to do that for them, to show them, to help them.
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
Absolutely. And, one thing we talked about last week, social media is good and bad. People see what it is they want you to see, not necessarily what reality is. But at the same point, for me growing up, yes, I had some access to the internet closer to high school, but not like it is daily. So in some regards, you didn't see all of this out there about suicide. So either A, it wasn't in your mind, or B, you didn't know how to help. That's one reason we have the 9-800 or the 988 suicide text number scrolling at the bottom. Anybody, they're there for you 24/7. Even if you have the smallest bit of a thought, reach out to someone. There are plenty of people that
Please.
want to help. OG's one, Pastor Cook,
Please.
myself, Renee, all of us. And there's more than just us. So there's many, many more. One thing I wanted to ask, and Renee, waiting to hear from your thoughts on all this as well. I don't know if we tried earlier. I couldn't hear you. If so,
Yeah, I think we are certainly merging two very important subjects here, right? We've talked plenty of times off air about cannabis and Christianity and what that looks like, right? And then we've also talked about, and I feel strongly about this, he who controls the media controls the narrative. So in the space of the statistics that you shared as we opened up the show regarding suicide, again, first we've got to think that we're talking about people that, remember, folks are still learning about cannabis. So when, if you can't blame it on something that you don't know, right? Make cannabis this awful negative thing. The same thing with it being in the church. And, suicide is looked upon negatively in the church, historically, stereotypically, as well as cannabis use. But I think that's about education. I think that's about making sure that, and I think as both of our guests have touched on, how important it is to have these candid conversations. It's taboo because we don't talk about it. But what is taboo is that we don't talk about it. So I am glad to see both of these men here speaking so openly and candidly on both platforms.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Because how do we expect anything to not be better if we can't discuss it?
Absolutely.
We talked about that last week. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's religious, political, within our own families, within race issues. If we can't talk, we can't fix it. but we need to
Yes.
talk positive, not aggressive. If I sat here and yelled at you guys and demeaned you the whole time, you wouldn't want to talk anymore. Yeah, but that's true. That's everywhere. One thing I definitely wanted to get all three of your opinions on, and this is something I've dealt with my own life, and I'm sure that you've seen it in the church as well. What are your guys' thoughts on a term that I think has finally come out called secondhand suicide? It's not that you want to die yourself by your own hands, but you would like for something to happen, whether it be a disease, a car wreck, something like that, so that you don't deal with this anymore, but your family or friends don't look at you as you did this to yourself. That's something I think that actually is a lot more common in this world than what we even think about. I think it's probably as much as people have suicidal ideologies on it, that I think they think this way too. Pastor Cook, start with you. What do you think, A, in that term, and B, how common, much so in the religious realm, have you seen that?
Yeah, I think not just in the religious realm, but certainly in the church. If you think about what draws a person to the church, is they are looking for an escape from something or from someone. So a person in the church is looking for a way of escape. And, a person who is contemplating or considering suicide is looking for a way of escape. And so in the church, we have to remember our goal or our purpose for existing in that community is not to judge others. It's not to criticize others. It's not even to direct others, so to speak. It's to point them toward Christ. And in doing so, we encourage each other and we love each other. But the foundation of our gathering is hope. And so, within the church, our hope or our goal is that as a result of being connected to Jesus and being connected to the mission, we are replacing discouragement and replacing doubt with love and hope. And when church is done right, a person who has not been able to internalize self-love is surrounded by so much external love that they discover the love within. But that's when it's done right. And so, to the person who is in the church or in the world who wants to die or who is contemplating suicide at their hand or to someone else's hand or at someone else's hand, in the book of Romans, the Apostle Paul says in Romans 12:12, rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, and be constant in prayer. I would say be as patient as you can possibly. It seems like such a cliche thing. Well, I've been patient as long as I've been alive. I've been patient with this, that, and the third. But when we are in the church, we are constantly in a pattern of waiting, which means patience. We are waiting on God to perfect us, not only in life, but even in death. And so while we do that, waiting means we are relying on God to determine when that end comes. And so, for those who are contemplating something different, there's no judgment here for me. My goal and the church's goals who are doing church right is that you would discover a reason to hope.
Absolutely. And to touch on your patience, and I think we ourselves, if we have a friend, family members going through it, we need to have patience on our end. Don't check on them every couple of days and then just stop. Maybe the time's not right.
Facts.
We may not hear from them for a couple of days. They're still on our mind. There's a reason we need to reach out to them. So be patient in your execution of trying to help them. Renee, your thoughts on, have you heard of this secondhand? Is it, something that you think is very prevalent and maybe even in your own thoughts?
Yeah, you hear a lot, and this necessary evil that we call social media, right? There was a young lady who committed suicide just last week, very publicly. And she was dating or involved with a well-known artist. Mm-hmm. And so because she did it publicly, he now has to respond publicly. And that concerns me because social media in itself is its own level of stress, if you will, of keeping up with the Joneses. So even in your darkest time, you're thinking, oh, how is this going to look on social media? When you talk about taking your life at the hands of someone else, we hear it often put suicide by police, right? Suicide by cop, where people intentionally put themselves in a situation where officers may have no choice but to in their life to save their own or for the, the greater good, if you will. And so I think that along with everything else that we're discussing, I think that everything unfortunately ends up being highlighted and not necessarily in social media is so uncontrollable that whatever gets put out there, if it gets enough likes, that makes it true, right? Which is scary, right? And so my thought is that we must all be cognizant of, and I will tell you personally, as an entrepreneur, I go through some dark times when people don't understand, like, because you're punching the clock and you have the even perceived comfort and security of a regular check. If I don't go fishing, I'm not eating, right? And you guys know I was down all last week. So guess what? I couldn't fish for 10 days. And so even now I'm dealing with, oops, wait a minute. I didn't get to go after this. I didn't get to put this proposal out there. So I'm almost have a 2-week lag. And that means I have a 2-week lag on finances coming in on some things, right? And who are those people? And this, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, self-made man, woman, whatever. That's not real. And we need to make it cool. It needs to be okay asking for help. Yes. It needs to be okay that you have a support circle. It needs to be okay that, hey, I know that be it 11 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock in the morning, if I reach out to Sam or Nate and say, yo, I need to talk, that there's going to be somebody there. And that's probably our biggest challenge, is finding and being comfortable and operating in a brave space to say, hey, I do need help, that it's not cowardly, that it actually takes a lot of power and a lot of strength to say, I need help.
Oh, I agree 100%. I mean, when I was going through my real dark times years ago, I remember I'd lay in bed going, God, can somebody text me? Can somebody call me? I need to talk to someone. Because I thought at that moment, I couldn't reach out to someone because they didn't care. It wasn't their problem. Mm-hmm. I don't need to bother them.
Right.
And my phone didn't ring. And that didn't help. It was what myself, I needed at that time to get through what I was. But people need other people.
Absolutely.
I agree with on the support. OG, your thought on the secondhand suicide and those thoughts and how prevalent it is?
Well, definitely pride. The word pride means a lot, because that's why people don't reach out. Like in my time, I was a well-known gang member. Like when I was in the streets, my name was everywhere. I was that person. People had my name hit up on the brick wall in their neighborhoods crossed out. I was that guy. So for me to come to someone at the status I had and say, I'm feeling suicidal, it was pride that kept me from doing it. Mm-hmm. And on a note of suicide by other hands, some people, they hear like, well, if you kill yourself, you're going to hell.
Yes.
Automatically, you kill yourself, you're going to hell. You're definitely not going to heaven. So people will look at it like, well, I want to die and I still want to have a chance at going to heaven. So I'm going to just go out here and doing that. Yeah. And that way I could be killed. And it's not self-inflicted. It's by someone else. And that is an illness. That's an illness, definitely, that we got to figure out a way to address it, because definitely it's a lot of people that wake up every day that just woke up this morning and said to themselves, I don't want to live. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to talk to. Yeah. I'm not going to talk to nobody because I don't want nobody to look down on me. Yeah. So I'm going to go out here and rob something. And I know when I walk out this door with this gun in my hand, the police is going to kill me. Right. And we got to also learn when things happen in our life to not go into panic mode.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just like loved one, she said, you know what, hey, I've been down for 10 days. You know, things wasn't happening the way it's supposed to, you know, financially. So I couldn't do anything for 10 days. She knew what she needed to do mentally and physically
Mm-hmm.
to once she was back on her feet and able to get back to her work, she could do that. She didn't panic like, oh, I don't know what to do. I can't take this. This ain't me. I want to
Yeah.
leave. That's just how it happened.
And it's a journey. Let me tell you, I've been on this entrepreneurial journey for a long time. And I would have panicked. You know what I mean?
Yes.
5 years ago, I would have panicked. I would have been like, oh, wait, you know.
See?
And I'm gonna tie it back into our overarching conversation. Hey, you know, when we're socially medicating, however we choose to ingest,
Yes.
I can't tell you that I've been in a socially medicated situation and somebody talked about we talk about solutions. So to be able to tie this plant to suicide is such hogwash to me, right? Because that's not even the mindset. Now, I know that I've heard those conversations when people have been drinking or using drugs, but since we're talking about a plant, and I don't know any plant that leads you to a dark place. And I would challenge anybody to share with me seriously any type of plant or natural usage that gets you to a dark place, whether it's shrooms, whether it's whatever that looks like, right?
Yes.
You know, we drink herbal tea so we calm down and we feel good. So how all of a sudden is there this one herb that is going to make us manic and make us depressive and make us want to kill ourselves? I'm calling BS on that one. And with all respect, Pastor, I'm trying to watch my little potty mouth here.
Yeah. Real quick too about what you said. You're on your journey. One thing I definitely would like to share with you that you're on your journey, and this is definitely a quote. A hospital, not the only thing with patients. You can quote that.
Yes. Yeah. I like that.
Well, I think one thing we got to remember is, and we've discussed it many times before, it's still a Scheduled I drug. Okay, that's not how we view it, but that's how it's
classified. Absolutely.
Right. And we're still talking about decrim and whatnot. So if you, and we've discussed before how many different organizations there are out there that have money to keep this to try to be from legal or being decriminalized, rescheduled, they're going to use what they can in their mind statistically to show their point.
Yes.
You know, and that's a mindset and what we've got to come together, just like the National Cannabis Political Party is doing. You know, I hope they're going to be huge this fall.
Yes.
Yeah.
We need them and they need us.
Yeah. Yep.
But, you know, for example, the number of cannabis users doubled between 2008 and 2019, rising from 22.6 million to 45 million in that time frame. And at that same point, they're saying people who suffered from major depression also rose from 14.5 to 19.4. And keep in mind, those stats are before the pandemic. How much do you think it came up after that? I mean, I think we all in our own lives, just like what Renee was saying, financially, business-wise, family-wise, we all suffered during that.
And let's be clear, this pandemic has not ended.
No.
We are still in the midst of a pandemic, maybe at a different level, maybe at a different phase of the pandemic, but this pandemic has not ended. And so I think that we are still figuring out and realizing the impact on mental health, where we were required to not be social. We as human beings are social creatures. And so we were asked for almost 2 years to operate out of a foundational norm. And that's going to have some overarching and some very broad implications for a long time to come. My father wants us to call this a plague. He said, this is more than a pandemic. This thing, whatever it was, whether you believe it was COVID, whatever it was, this is going to have overarching impacts for the next decade. You will see tiebacks to. And while some people won, some people lost. We lost over 1 million people in our society. So when you see, people don't want to work, we're down 1 million people. And even if you weren't one of those million that took your last breath during that time, imagine how many people were impacted by the death of those million.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so that's a big deal. I mean, in numbers, what you can't lie about is numbers. What you can't skew is the numbers. And so those people that are no longer with us, that's a real thing.
No, absolutely. In 2020, the state of Georgia itself, population was 10.52 million. So think about that in terms of the numbers you just gave. What, just from a state view, those amount of people, how much percent of that state is now wiped away? Now let's put that in a global scale. I mean, that's countries that were wiped off the face of this earth. Countries.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm sure Pastor Cook could speak on it. I'm sure that you saw it in your day-to-day work, not just in the funeral home, but I mean, how it affected the members of your congregation, how they felt depressed or controlled or kept away, not just from church. We saw that as a driving force, but how it affected them in terms of their day-to-day life and how your congregation was affected.
Yeah, we lost many members, and we're not an extremely large congregation. Post-COVID, we had, before COVID, we had 700 active members, roughly. And of those 700 members, I know we had at least 50 to pass to COVID. And so what that meant is there were possibly 50 families that were, basically changed. Their family dynamic changed. And so, as a result of dad or mom no longer being here, it's been very difficult for some people to re-enter those sacred spaces. It's been difficult for some families to recover when the breadwinner has passed, or, maybe mom passed and our health insurance and our health benefits were through mom's job. And, so now we can't go to the dentist and we can't go to the doctor. And, so the residual effects of the pandemic have been enough to send anyone into depression. People who had brand new businesses that were thriving before the pandemic. I mean, just thriving, that died instantly because their cash flow could not even support 30 days of interrupted business flow. People whose homes, they might be in their homes, but what about the landlords who are still without rent payments in some situations and incapable of reclaiming, property. So, I think it's prevalent, sir. I think you're absolutely correct.
No, absolutely. I was thinking about when it first happened, for example, some restaurants that opened that weren't necessarily even just a small business owner. These people who paid in as a franchise fees, did they get that back? Was that gone? I don't know. So even those people who didn't put their own money to start a business, they were affected by trying to go forward as well. And I don't even know if those people got any help or relief, sadly. And now, OG, you're out in California, correct? You can speak more of how it affected there. We're all in Georgia, and we saw a great impact, but I'm sure you saw even higher and still are.
I know several people too that had businesses that they had just opened, and seeing how happy they were to just be opening a business, and then to just see a storm just come through and, take them from 100 to 0. Like it definitely was crushing. And I know several people that lost loved ones to COVID. I lost several family members to COVID, and it definitely, it like loved ones said, it's not gone. It's not gone, and we don't know what's next. It's like taking names and, putting them in a hat and pulling out one and see which one you pick, because we don't know what's going to happen next. But something's definitely, is coming. Monkeypox, okay, they ain't pushing that, but it's something going to happen, definitely. And we have no control.
No, we don't. You're absolutely right. And something else I wanted to mention today is, this is something I saw, and OG, I know you can speak on it, and from Pastor Cook's end, as well as Renee being an entrepreneur, you all can, of course, but I found a thing that says help when you're going through these problems, these thoughts, depressions, some ideas that could help. Some of it I think possibly could be great. Some of it I'm not sure. All three of you definitely chime in from different realms. But like it's saying make a list of things you would miss. But the question I have is when somebody's in that much of a thought, I don't know that they're thinking about what they're going to miss. They're thinking about what they're going to alleviate from.
Not have to deal with any wrong. Exactly. Right. At that point, if you've thought it through to that level, making a list may be a little too little too late, if you will, right? That would be my thought. Because once you get there, you aren't as concerned about what you're, like you said, what you're leaving behind versus what you won't have to deal with anymore if you've gotten to that point, right? And it's so how do you keep from getting to that point? But once you get to that point, what are those? So I think there's levels to it, right? There's different things that would have, hey, maybe the first time you think about it, that's when you jot down that list. Okay, here's what it would alleviate, but here's what I would miss. And maybe that's, where you do a good and bad list, right? Maybe that's what it is. It's a dual-sided list, right? And then find somebody that you're willing to share your list with and talk through your list, right? Let's talk about it, because you hearing that in somebody else's voice, or you even hearing your voice say it to someone else versus you saying it in your own head, right? That's going to feel different. That's going to feel different. And so, yeah.
Yeah, OT, what do you think? I mean, making a list, I see it could be good and bad.
I mean, me personally, maybe some of those things you put on that list are things you want to get away from.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So I definitely, I don't think the list is it. I think actually getting love, actually physically talking to someone about how you're feeling, because to me that list, and let's say you actually commit suicide and they see that list is almost like a suicide note that was left behind. Well, I don't know what these list of things were that it wrote down a bunch of different things on the list. I don't know what that meant. So I feel like it's better to physically talk to someone. Like, we live in a time where people, like I said earlier, pride. You have so much pride. It's like, who do you talk to? You don't want to be looked down on. Or as soon as you tell somebody something, oh man, I'm feeling suicidal. Oh, you crazy, man. What's wrong with you? You think you're dumb. You an idiot. This fool over here talking about, now they on the phone with family members. Instead of embracing what they just said, now they on the phone with family. Oh, this idiot over here talking about killing himself. I don't know what's wrong with. Now everybody's talking about this individual, which put them in a deeper, dark spot. Hey, man, such just called me. What's wrong with you, man? You over there talking about you want to kill yourself? That don't help the situation. Here's I mentioned this story last week. I always go speak at any suicide awareness campaigns, whatever it is. I met a gentleman at one. He heard my story, heard me speak, and he's based out of Texas. And he was like, wow, man, your life, like, it's a trip to see what you went through, to see how, where you at now with your life. So he goes back to Texas, and his brother tells him, like, man, I don't want to live no more, man. I want to die, man. I can't take this no more. He's like, oh, you want to die? Well, you want me to give you a gun so you can kill yourself? You idiot. I'll give you the gun, man. Here go the gun. You want to kill yourself? Here, take it and go do it. Very next day, he called me. And when I picked up the phone, like, when I'm talking about broke down, he was broke down. Literally broke, screaming, crying. And when he was finally able to tell me what had happened, it destroyed him. Right. And this happened about 5 years ago. Right now to this day, he's still devastated, because he said he wished he would have thought about me and got me on the phone. But instead, he said something to his brother. And the very next day, his brother committed suicide. And it messed him up. And he's still messed up to this day. When someone say how they feel, or even if they like, man, I'm really not feeling it today, embrace that. Because that I'm not feeling it today, I don't want to live anymore. So you got to catch it in the beginning, or you won't get it at the end.
No, I think that's a great point. And, you know, from what you've seen, Pastor, the list, is it two-sided? Is it beneficial? I mean, yes, like Renee said, good and bad. Absolutely. There's going to be good and bad everything. We also, like you said, remember, it is a day at a time. I can speak for myself. Renee knows, she's saying, Sam, May 1st, I started a new program. I am now almost 65 pounds down from where I was May 1st. Guess what?
Wow.
That didn't happen in a day. It didn't happen in a week. It kept day by day. And yes, there were ups and downs, but it is a day-by-day process in health, mental, physical, everything. You know, Pastor Cook, your thoughts on those?
Yeah, well, you know, if a list is going to be created for the purpose of celebration and motivation, and not used as a benchmark, you know, against what is wrong, or you know, a score record of what's wrong in life, if that list is going to be a blessing to you, so be it. But in terms of suicide, sometimes in grief, it's very easy to develop what's called displaced grief. And displaced grief can really wreck anyone. You know, you can grieve over things, relationships, not just life. And so, you know, sometimes when a family is grieving and there are pieces left behind, so to speak, it leaves more unanswered questions. It creates more uncertainty. It creates more of a mystery hunt now. Now we've got another clue to follow, and we need to figure out, you know, we need to get to the bottom of this. In the church, we have this saying that we will understand everything better by and by. And, you know, that's some of that talk that in order for it to feel good, you got to be in the church. You know, if you're not in the church and if you're dealing with things right now, that means absolutely nothing to you to tell me that I'm going to understand this later. But what that does for those of us who do subscribe to that kind of thinking, it relaxes the pressure to understand why. If you are waiting on the moment of understanding, that may never come. And so what that means is you will forever spend your life in a pattern of searching. And that's not what God desires for any of us. I do want to say this has been on my heart since we've talked about it. Whether you are thinking about suicide, whether you identify as a homosexual, whether you are a murderer, whether you are poor, whatever it is that you think of, God is not looking for any reason to push people away. You know, God did not allow, for those of us who subscribe to the church's belief, God did not allow his son Jesus to die on our behalf for God to then turn around and say, I don't want to be bothered with these people. I don't want to be bothered with people who smoke weed. You know, I don't want to be bothered with people who, you know, have abortions. I don't want to be, that's not the nature of God. And so to a person who is potentially suicidal or has come in contact with suicide, who is within the church or in the world, I would just remind you that God is love, and that any message that differentiates from that is not of God, whether that comes from family, friends, church, the gathering of a list unintentionally. So, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is, list or not, we need to subscribe to hope. And for those of us who identify as Christians, or those of us who believe that God is the higher power, I'm just here to tell you that God loves you, you know, no matter what you're dealing with.
I agree completely, because to sum in what all of y'all have said, when I was at my lowest point, right after getting divorced, that first holiday time frame, my thought was I didn't want to be here anymore. And yes, I know I would miss my kids, but at that moment, my thought was they'll be better off without me. This is for them. They'll understand one day, but they're also the reason I got through this. So the list is both sided, I think. You know, there's A good, there's B bad. So we've got to go beyond the list, you know. Like we said, one day at a time. Another thought was dunking your head in cold water. I don't know. I mean, that helps in a lot of things, but does it in that particular case? I don't know about that one. You know, engage in distractions, getting your mind in different realms, taking a walk, doing something physical could definitely help for sure. You know, checking in with friends and family, like we said, don't just give up on them. You know, your guys' thoughts on the distractions, checking in with the family, some of those type things. You know, Renee, how do you think that's going to help those people with those type of thoughts?
The challenge there is that you are asking people in a state of distress and despair to act rationally,
Right.
right? They're emotionally in a different space, and so again, if you're talking with a group of people that may be going into a stressful situation, you're saying, hey, here's some things to alleviate your stress, and right. But if somebody is in the midst of a suicide crisis, that list, and like OG said, is obsolete. I think that it's, it looks good on paper. It might have gotten some views or, a couple of reads or what have you, but we've got to talk about what's real and the application thereof. And at the end of the day, I'm going to go back to that. We are social creatures. We cannot do this thing called life by ourselves. And it's time to address and evaluate your circle. It's time to think about what not only your circle can do for you, what you add to it, and what you may need from that circle. And do you have Nate can't solve all my issues, but hey, if it's something about this, Nate's going to be my go-to, right? And so one, not putting all of our proverbial eggs in one basket, putting that weight on just one or two people. You're asking a lot from another human being, right? But making sure that you have those resources. And, I know that last week when I was down, I had a couple of people to call. Well, my first two hit and they came in like gangbusters. They put on their capes and brought me what I needed. But I had a list too, right? And then once certain people knew, because I didn't share with everybody that I work with that I was sick. Unfortunately, people are going to look at that as a sign of weakness or whatever. But those that I felt comfortable sharing, you guys made sure that, hey, every day or two, I'm checking on Renee because
Right.
if she's not doing the show, I know she's not right. And so those are the people that you look to, and those are the people you tend to gravitate towards. And it's called life, and it's called learning. Everybody that started the journey won't finish it with you. That's not a failure. That's just everybody grows, right? And we grow differently and we move differently. That doesn't mean I have a very dear friend, and I know that we have not talked live in 2 years. But I know that if the heat gets too hot, she's one of my top 5. If something gets really funky, I know that I'm calling Keisha, because Keisha's going to be the one to help me understand, one, that my feelings, validate my feelings, right? To say, like you said, oh, you shouldn't feel like that, or you're going to hell if you, you get ready to send them on an express route to hell, because you know what I mean? You're telling them how screwed up they are. Well,
Yes.
that ain't what they need to hear right now. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I think that's it. That's our fee for being on this earth, for being good to other people, and people will be good to you. For people who don't believe in spirituality, bless your heart, but that's karma, whatever you need to label it as. But I think that's cyclical. If it's a cycle. You may be able to take care of somebody else, and that person may not be able to take care of you, but find you somebody that can. And you can't be mad at that person because they aren't equipped. You know what I mean? I'll be very candid. My father is not equipped for conversations like this. And I found out in a hard way, right? With only my mother. My mother's been gone for 19 years now. I was going through a hard time. Somebody reached out to my father, and my father basically, hey, Renee's having a hard time. Renee needs to get her shit together, was his response. Well, he doesn't understand, but he's changed our relationship, right? Because I know when the chips are down, I love him dearly, but he can't be my go-to, right? And that's hard, especially when it's, you know, your father or anybody else that you would, but everybody can't carry that. Everybody's not built to carry it.
Nope.
Well, not just that. Unfortunately, our family are supposed to be the ones that are, blood and hold us. We can go to them for everything and anything, but sometimes we feel like they're going to be the ones who hold it over us.
Yeah.
What will they have? What can they benefit from later? So be careful who you open to, who you trust.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Not everybody wants to support and lift you.
Yep.
Fact.
For sure.
Definitely too. Family, a lot of family will be the first ones to let you down. Yeah. And always remember too as well, just like an old saying, you are what you eat. I believe in you are who you surround yourself with. If everybody in your circle is not helping and uplifting, then there's something bad in that circle.
Right.
Definitely. It definitely is. And like an old EPMD quote, you hang with 9 broke friends, you're bound to be the 10th.
You'll be the 10th one.
So definitely surround yourself around the right people. Y'all all have to have a goal. It ain't got to be the same goal. It don't have to be the same vision, but all of y'all together are uplifting each other, going in the same direction.
Yes.
Key pointers in life. And I had to learn that. I had so many bad weeds around me for many years that I thought was good. And eventually they removed themselves. Sometimes you have to people. They will remove themselves. I was naive, and I would know that they wasn't good, but me having the heart that my adopted mom taught me to have, I pretty much been. I was feeding snakes. I was feeding snakes.
Yeah.
And they can hiss harder. And the whole time I was the prey. I was who they was snaking. But I'm like, oh, it's good. It's good. I ain't worried about it. Eventually, all them people removed themselves, and now I know everyone that's around me. I could take my life and put it in their hands and let them walk away with it. And I know they're going to bring it back safely.
Yeah, I got to shout out my family that has tuned in on my other one. I see you, Amy. I see you, Nucci. And those are those family members and those loved ones that that you can go to, right? That when it's really down, when it's really ugly. So I'm glad to see them here so I can just tell them I love them and thank you for being, playing that role in my life. That it doesn't matter how long we go without seeing each other, that, hey, if the chips are down, here's 2 folks on my list that I know, listen, get them on the phone. We're going to figure it out. Not being here isn't the solution. Let's figure out what it is.
Yes.
And like you said, let's love on you until you get to that new space.
Absolutely. And Pastor, thoughts on those little things we've been on the last couple of minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. And also let me say too, I think I misunderstood the list. I thought we were talking about suicide list. I think
we did, and then we kind of went into other realms because they all come back to the same.
Welcome to the show, Pastor. We're known to get off on a tangent every now and then.
Well, my mind has helped being a little spaced out here, so I give you. But no, I think you're absolutely right, and I'm so glad that you all are doing the work that you do, because you, unlike the church, you represent everybody. You represent such a broad reality of life, and the church is really just one segment. Like everything that you all represent, you could be all of that and still be in the church, like if that makes sense. But the church is just one segment of life, just one way that God reaches us. And so the church has made so many mistakes along the way in everything that we ever talk about, from raising kids to smoking dope to suicide to sexual orientation. The church has always had trouble getting it right. And so for you all to make space or make room in this space for the church to not necessarily give impartation or to give information, but to receive and to hear and to have a heartbeat on the ground, I think is right. If the church people were listening this morning, I hope that they hear you when they heard. I hope that they heard what I heard, in that we need to be able to be talked to. People need to know they can come to us. People need to know that it's a non-judgment zone.
Yeah.
You need to know before you give them scripture that you love them, that you care about them. And so, I am excited about the opportunity to continue listening to you guys, to continue learning from you all, and taking what we do in this space back to that small space in which you all already belong, whether or not people identify within the church. All of us, we ourselves are the church that Jesus came for, not the buildings, not the traditions, not the religions. Each and every one of us, black, red, blue, yellow, white, green, all of us. That's who.
Yes.
Well,
Okay,
Pastor,
Pastor,
to your
you're gonna
point,
have us passing the plate in a minute,
right?
now.
Well, and that's the whole point to what you said, Pastor. It literally says where two or more are gathered in my name, so am I. It's not brick and mortar. It's not the structure. It's not the building. One thing I've always felt is that I'm a man of faith, a religious man, but religion is made by man, so therefore it's fallible. So when you talked about the mistakes, it's because man made religion. God did not. God made us.
Mm-hmm.
Facts.
So we are the base. We are the ones, and we are the ones who need to be there for the others.
Yes.
So I think now's the perfect time. We'll go with Renee. We're going to go with your closing thoughts and also how people can reach out to you. And we need your word of the day.
Oh, yeah. So the word of the day is going to be love. OG, I hear you. And that's it. Whether it's love for this plant, love for each other, love for your spiritual walk, and love for yourself. Because it's got to start there, right? You are your own foundation.
Yes.
Canna Body Designs. We are creating conversations around cannabis, wearable art. You can find us at cannabodydesigns.com. You can find us on IG at canna_body_designs. And we are available right now exclusively, but we plan to grow at Hidden Treasures here in the Atlanta area, right in Whitehall in the Castleberry Hills district. Let's continue these cannabis conversations. Let's continue to create brave spaces across the board, and look forward to seeing y'all next week. Thank you to our guests for being here. Amazing conversation.
Yes.
OG, your final thoughts, where they can find you, support you?
Definitely. Definitely can find me on Instagram, and that's OG Suicide. That's OG CUICIDE. And my word of the day definitely is never give up. And one thing I always do, every time I do an interview or wherever I am and I speak, I always give out my personal number for anyone that's in that dark spot or feel like they don't have anyone that they can talk to. Yeah, I know definitely that there's hotlines out there, but guess what? My line is out there also. And my number is 310-938-9376. 310-938-9376. Don't ever feel like you don't want to be a burden. Don't ever feel like you don't want to bother me with your problems. Don't ever feel anything other than I need to call and express myself and open up. Never let nothing build up on the inside, because too much pressure will bust a pipe. I've had this number 17 years. I average about 15 to 20 phone calls every day, 50 messages on Instagram every day. But guess what? I answer everybody. So please contact me.
That's amazing. It really is.
OG, can you give me that number one more time?
310
Uh-huh.
938
Okay.
9376.
Okay.
All right, Pastor Cook, your closing thoughts, where people can find and follow you.
Well, thank you all for having me again. You can find me on Instagram at Tamarcus Cook. That's just TA Marcus with the K. Also, our business, we are online, www.cookbrothers, F as in Frank, D as in David.com, cookbrothersfd.com. You can join us every Sunday in worship at St. Smyrna Baptist Church. We are online via Facebook Live, YouTube, and in person. And my closing thoughts for us today would be never lose hope. Hope is all we've got. Keep it.
Absolutely. I want to thank all of y'all for being here. Also, for those, whether it's your first time listening or not, we are broadcasting on multiple platforms. These shows are still available to be watched again. Get somebody to watch it with you. Send the links to people. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram, Twitter. We got a YouTube channel now too. So we're broadcasting everywhere there. OG, I'd love to actually put your number up on our foundation page and whatnot.
Please do. Please
maybe somebody heard it in there. I can't write it down.
Please
look
do.
for our, absolutely, for sure. Look for the Matcha Foundation page. We will put it on Facebook. We will put it on our Twitter. We have it for you. We have the means to try to help. My closing thoughts, other than following me on Twitter and on Instagram at DJNQ75, check on each other. Be there for each other. But also remember, even the ones who you think are the strongest in your life, they need to be checked on too. They're givers, but sometimes you give so much that you kind of need to be replenished a little bit yourself. So let's just check on everybody. I encourage everybody this week to check on at least 5 people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I like what you just said, because
Challenge accepted.
sometimes the person that everyone can vent to needs someone to vent to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great, 100%. Like we said, we're always available. You can reach out to me through those different platforms. Just like OG, I'd be happy to talk to you. Maybe I can't be all of your solutions, but I'll try to help make it better any way that I can. Never be afraid to help and ask for help.
Yep.
With that, everybody, have a blessed week. Look forward to seeing you again next week.
See y'all. Definitely.
Exciting times. Let's have a great week.
Thank you.
Bless everybody.
See you
Take care.
guys.
See y'all.